pints, we're over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Alastair Stewart. Coming up on the show, has Sajid Javid's call on GPs to boost the booster programme put primary care at risk? The Tories hold Old Bexley on a low turnout, but Labour's share is up 7% and Reform UK come third. Will it prompt more grumblings about the PM's prospects? And bruised, battered or just bunged away? Why are so many people getting damaged goods or nothing at all? And do the big delivery companies even care? All of that coming up, but first a news update. Here is Karen Roberts.
Thank you, Alastair. These are your latest headlines. The stepmother of Arthur Labinjo Hughes has been jailed for life for the 6-year-old's murder. 32-year-old Emma Tustin will serve a minimum of 29 years in prison for starving, poisoning and killing the little boy in June 2020. Arthur's father, 29-year-old Thomas Hughes, was sentenced to 21 years for manslaughter. Former Children and Families Minister Tim Loughton told GB News that more needs to be done to protect children.
There's been a lot of focus on adult social care, where we need to do lots of things to help older people in later life. But children's social care has not been getting that same focus. And we've now got a lot of vulnerable children and families. We've now got a recent record number, over 80,000 in the care system.
Wales has confirmed its first case of the Omicron COVID variant. That's according to the Cardiff and Vale University Health Board. It comes as the World Health Organization warns that the Omicron variant is very transmissible, but urged people not to panic. Speaking earlier, the WHO chief scientist said the majority of cases they'd investigated saw mild symptoms, although it was too early to declare it a weaker strain.
Always a lag between infection progressing to severe disease. So as you know, when you see a surge of infections, it's 2 weeks later that you start seeing that surge in hospitalizations and deaths. So I think we need to wait. Let's hope it's milder.
One of the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officers has told GB News the public could play a vital role in preventing another terror attack. Scotland Yard's Deputy Assistant Commissioner, Matt Twist, is urging the public to be extra vigilant in the run-up to Christmas. But he says people shouldn't change their plans. After 2 attacks in a month, enhanced police patrols will be operating in town and city centres over the festive period. The parents of a boy accused of killing 4 students at a secondary school in the US are also facing charges. Prosecutors have charged Jennifer and James Crumbly with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Their son, 15-year-old Ethan, was charged as an adult with murder, attempted murder and terrorism for the shooting on Tuesday at a high school in Michigan. Long-serving director of cricket, Martin Moxon, head coach, Andrew Gale and the entire coaching team have left Yorkshire Cricket Club. It follows an investigation into claims by Azim Rafiq that he suffered racist abuse while at the club. Yorkshire Chair Lord Patel says significant change is required at the club to regain trust. You're right up to date now. Back to Alastair.
Karen, thank you. The coronavirus has disrupted GP services in a bid to protect the men and women in this vital service. But as the threat receded, the disruption didn't. Folk still find it difficult to get face-to-face appointments. More and more are still asked to use phone calls and Zoom. Now, that's fine for some, not for many, especially the old, the less techie and the vulnerable. Already fewer than 50% can get an appointment immediately. Many have to wait weeks. And tonight, NHS England has said regular health checks for the over 75s may be halted because of pressures caused by the booster programme. Now, that instruction from the Health Secretary that GPs should be the front line in the booster campaign at the expense of their other functions is the focus of our conversation tonight. The scale of the challenge is huge. Fully 28% of people in care homes, among the most vulnerable, are yet to get boosted. But pressing GPs into the front line is fraught. Diagnoses will suffer, referrals will suffer, more will be missed, and more life-saving operations delayed. The GPs themselves admit it will create serious problems. The Vice-Chairman of the Royal College of GPs, Gary Howsam, says, and I quote, "We can't be doing all things all the time." And the public purse glues open once again. The booster bonus is raised from £22.58 a shot to £30. Dr. Farrell Jamil, chair of the BMA's GP committee, says they just don't have the capacity to meet the new challenge, despite the lure of that extra lucre. Well, Sajid Javid remains confident that they could play a full part in delivering 25 million booster jabs by the end of January. Well, clearly, someone is not listening to someone. But it does raise once again a more serious question. What is the GP service really about these days? Is it a service from men and women that's gone from the days of Bill Simpson's Dr. Finley's Casebook or even Martin Clune's Grumpy Dot Martin, known, trusted and accessible members of the community, to a group of private businesses with their own budgets and a secrecy over their own earnings? The gateway service is slowly transforming to something quite unrecognisable. I can see the need for a short-term plan to bolster boosters, but pharmacies, walk-in health centres, service medics, let us milk them all before we further curtail the availability of our precious GPs. And once we're in calmer waters, let us ask what it is that we actually want from the GP service, which we fund, and ask for a little more candour from the government over what it thinks the GP service is supposed to be doing. Now, this morning, as I had a coffee, I saw this advert, a poster for walk-in private GP services. Prices there start at £35. Evolution or revolution? We need to pause when we can and ask about those who can't afford that. And anyway, is it what we really want? It might be, but it would have been nice to have been asked. So that's what I think, but what do people in the medical profession think of the situation? Let's speak to a couple of them now, and I'm delighted to be joined first of all by Dr. Lawrence Jerlis, who has been a GP for 30 years and is the Chief Executive of Same Day Doctor. Good of you to join us this evening. Before we get onto the booster jabs issue particularly, let's be clear, You're a private GP. Is such a status increasingly common?
People are becoming more aware, particularly during the pandemic. I mean, for many years, people would come to us and say they had no idea that our type of service existed. And certainly within the last 6 months, we've seen an increasing number of people using private GP services. And tragically, we've seen people who haven't been able to get face-to-face appointments. I saw a woman last week who had advanced ovarian cancer who hadn't been examined. And I had to get her off to hospital, the same day. So, yes, the answer is people are aware of our services now, and sadly, we are picking up a lot of the work that the health service is unable to do.
Yep. And as I made clear in my introduction there, with the little poster saying 35 quid for starters just to go in there, this is people who can afford to do it, voting with their wallets and voting with their symptoms.
Yes, I mean, you've put it exactly right, that this has happened, but you haven't been asked to do it. Actually, in fact, maybe if people who can afford it can spare the health service, maybe that's the way people should go. But let's be more honest and open about it. Other countries have systems that are a combination of charity, self-payment and government payment. And people tend to think there's only two alternatives, our system or the American system. There's not. And most European countries have insurance-based systems. You protect the vulnerable, the elderly, and you have some government backing as well. So maybe it is the future. I'm not saying this to promote myself. I never have over the years. I'm actually a great believer in the health service. I believe in free at the point of use. But if you can't access the GP service, that is completely pointless anyway. What's the point of it being free if you simply can't approach your GP? And I think you had personal experience of being unwell recently and being in hospital. So, you've got first-hand experience of the pressure that the service is under.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you rightly say there, let's have that debate when the time is right, but it needs to be resolved. Let me bring you right up to date then, if I may, Lawrence. What impact do you think this edict on focusing booster jabs on the GP service will have on other GP services?
I agree with what you said, that I think the booster program should be rolled out by pharmacists, by nurses, and the GP should get on with doing their job of seeing patients. But interestingly, this has been a very clever finessing by the government, because the GPs and the government have been at loggerheads for a long time. The government's saying you must do more face-to-face consultation. The GP's saying everyone's bullying us, the press are picking on us, patients are giving us bad reviews. And the GPs have been asking for more money. They say, and quite rightly, they are very busy. They're seeing a lot of work. People have been avoiding doctors during the pandemic, but now there's a build-up of demand. And what the government have done quite cleverly, they've finessed this. The government's narrative is to get the booster program out, and so they've put the money there, and that presumably will keep the GPs happy for a while. As you say, £30 injection is actually quite well paid, even by my standards. So I think that it will keep the GPs happy, but it will divert them from doing the job that we want them to do, which is to see patients face to face and to try to clear the enormous backlog of what's been left after nearly 2 years.
How shocked were you to learn this evening, as indeed were we, that the NHS itself, not a government minister, has said that because of this move on jabs, regular health checks for the over 75s may be curtailed?
And we've had a long time of things being cancelled, things being put aside, all these COVID excuses, not just in medicine, but other areas. We've seen hospital appointments cancelled, routine operations cancelled. Quite frankly, I'm not that bothered about the routine checks for over 75s. I'm not sure how valuable those are anyway. What I think the GP should be doing is examining patients who need to be examined. Patients have been unwell. I saw someone who'd had 3 phone consultations, had 3 different antibiotics for a supposed urine infection, and when he came into me, he had a kidney stone. So, unless you see your patients, you examine them, you run some tests, you're not going to find out what's wrong with them. So, I think that what the GP should be doing is enough face-to-face consultations to examine the unwell patients. Yes, do some phone consultations to sort out some of the more administrative matters or minor matters. I'm not that keen on routine health checks anyway. I think they probably a waste of time. But I am shocked that people are using COVID or the vaccine program just to run away from doing their regular work, both in hospitals and in general practice.
Final question. Do you think we'll ever get back to what purports to be normal?
I don't actually, Alastair. I think that the health service was struggling even prior to the pandemic. There's a huge staffing shortage. I've been onto agencies. I'm trying to get locums to cover us. There's a terrible shortage of GPs. A lot of GPs now working part-time. I think general practice is in permanent crisis, and I can't see an easy solution to that, not within the next few years. And you can put more money into it, but if you don't have the staff, that's a bit pointless. And there's a huge shortage of staff. You can't take doctors from other countries who need their own doctors. It's probably not the right thing to do. We need to find ways of running our primary care in a more efficient way.
Great to talk to you, Dr. Lawrence Gurlis. Thank you very much indeed for your time this Friday evening. So that's one view of one doctor, a private GP. We can now hear from an NHS GP, Dr. David Lloyd. David, very good of you to join us as well this Friday evening. In your view, can GPs, people like you, do the booster jab programme and still serve their patients with the general offer that you've always tried to do?
Golly, I think that's a very difficult one. I think we've been hoist by our own success, really. When the first vaccinations started, we all geared up to give them. All our staff were based in vaccination centres, and we achieved fantastic results in getting everybody vaccinated. But the thought of now having to take staff out of our practices and start up those vaccination centres again to give the booster doses, and the remaining 25% who need to be vaccinated, and really do need to be vaccinated, the thought of having to do that while we're trying to achieve some sort of normality in trying to see the patients, as Lawrence outlined, we need to see patients face to face now to make sure that they're well. I run we used to be called a walk-in centre, but is now called a GP access centre. We just opened this week because we've just shut our COVID hub, and seeing patients face to face, and the real pleasure they've got out of seeing a GP after many months of dealing with them on the phone is really very gratifying and is great. And so the thought that we're going to have to give up, for whatever amount of money is involved, give up that process and go back to the vaccination centres and give hundreds of thousands of vaccines is not a great idea. And we're going to lose our pharmacists and our nurses, and we're going to have to rotate through the vaccination centres, being the sort of, the top dog in case there are any problems. And it really should be done by other people. We should be able to get on with general practice now.
Well, great to hear that, because that was precisely Lawrence Gerlis's view as well. Interesting.
Lawrence was also making the point about private general practice. I think I would hesitate to say we should cream off primary care for the rich to go to private services. It's the well young people that provide if you like, the little bit of relief we get in general practice, so that we've actually got the money coming in to look after people who really need it. If you cream off,
absolutely right. Let me to be crystal clear to you, as I was to Lawrence, I am not proposing for one moment that everybody should have to pay, because I'm totally in favour, always have been, of those that genuinely can't, should never have to. But those who've got a bit more disposable income at least might consider doing the option. But let me take you back to something you said, a really dramatic statement from you, delivered albeit very calmly, and that is how excited you and your patients were at inching back to normality, only to hear now from the Secretary of State for Health and Care, that's got to stop because you've now got to be jabbing. I mean, it strikes me, listening to you as an objective witness, that this is one of the most crass decisions that's been made by the Secretary of State in this entire coronavirus.
No, I mean, I'd love it to be headline news, but this is terribly nuanced, isn't it? I do feel slightly sorry for government in that we've got a race on. We've got to get everybody vaccinated, because that looks like it's the only way that we're going to beat this new variant, is to get people vaccinated with their boosters as quickly as possible. And we've got to do it. And we've got there are people out there, general practice. I'm not talking about GPs, I'm talking about the GP teams who have proven that they are good at it. You mentioned pharmacists. We've got some fantastic pharmacists in our area who are going to gear up as well, but they're run on volunteers. Everybody's getting tired. So it is very difficult to make a decision about whether you ramp up general practice teams again to do this, or you look at other ways of doing it. I hope they're going to look at alternatives as we come along, but it is about speed.
I take that point completely, and I genuinely, hand on heart, I'm renowned in the industry for not being someone who goes fishing for gotcha moments, and I despise that sort of conversation.
But I can't cope with any more gotcha moments.
You know as well as I do, because you've spoken to it this evening already, that there are waiting lists in hospitals, referrals are down because you're tied up with other stuff and you've had to adopt certain limitations in your own practice. Waiting times are up. Some people are having to wait ages and ages before they see people. There was a real crisis out there in primary care before ever Sajid Javid came along and said, oh, can you also take over the booster programme?
Well, but they're all so interconnected. That's the trouble, is that, if the COVID rates go up, then your ITUs fill up. And the people who've been waiting for years and years for their knee replacements, they're going to be frailer than they were, so they'll need an ITU bed after they've had their knee replacement. So the whole system is in a very fine balance, and you knock one bit and the other bit falls over. So yes, you can talk about GPs and you talk about hospitals and COVID, but everything is totally interrelated. And it just takes one little nudge for the whole system to fall over.
Yeah. Final point on that score, and it's the same question I put to Lawrence at the end. Do you believe that when the coronavirus is either over or genuinely manageable, that we will revert to what was normality in primary care, or does it need a fundamental rethink in the light of everything you've been through over the last 2 years?
No, it won't go back to the same. We ask patients, do they want to have a telephone call, a face-to-face, or a video call? You ask 100 patients, and only 30 of them will want a face-to-face. So we will have to get used to this new multimedia, multi-mode way of general practice. It is the future. It is more cost-effective and will enable more patients to get what they need.
And that's the bottom line, and a great way to end. David Lloyd, Dr. David Lloyd, really grateful for your candour and for your time this evening here on GB News. Thank you very much indeed. Two eminent and quite brilliant GPs giving their open-minded and open-hearted views on this matter. It is a challenge for them, equally importantly as it is for all of us, but I hope that their thoughts informed you. Now, I say that partly because when I announced, I don't know, it was sort of mid-afternoon that we were going to have these conversations on Twitter, that I'd be discussing the state of the GP services and what would happen, it prompted a huge reaction. Let me just give you a flavour of that, but it runs up to the thousands of comments. Andrea wrote, it's becoming significantly harder to see your GP. If that's because they're too busy jabbing people, then why not let others do it? We were led to believe they were trying to avoid face-to-face contact during COVID, but you have to get pretty close to someone to vaccinate them. Piper said, I'm hoping it will encourage them to vaccinate extremely vulnerable household people, because getting to them has been like pulling teeth. You'd think they'd be a priority, wouldn't you? Especially the ones that rely on a stream of carers. And Dean wrote, GPs haven't said that they won't be doing much else for a while. GPs will see sick people as usual, but thanks to NHS England, we'll now have a pause on form filling and data collection. We've been given time to prioritise high-risk patients and vaccines. So, as I say, just a flavour there, but thank you all very much indeed. We love those conversations, whether it's via GB News on Twitter or on Facebook or on TikTok. Keep it coming in. It keeps us on our toes as well. Thank you all very much indeed. After the break, we'll speak to one of the country's most respected pollsters to see what last night's by-election result really means for the major parties. But first, here's the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, rather changeable conditions this weekend. There will be outbreaks of rain at times for just about all of us at some point. However, it does tend to turn drier and brighter for most on Sunday, if feeling on the chilly side. Now back to the here and now, a number of weather fronts skirting across southern counties of England. Meanwhile, this weather front waiting in the wings will bring thicker cloud and outbreaks of showery rain in from the northwest. This may well give some sleet or snow over the higher ground of the north. All in all, quite a lot of cloud around overnight tonight, and that will help keep temperatures up, at least not falling too low. We could just see a touch of frost in more rural parts of the west, where we do see clearing skies towards the end of the night. So a little bit of a chilly start for some tomorrow, but not as cold as some recent mornings. However, as the wind starts to become brisker through the course of the day, it will feel decidedly chilly, even where we do get a glimpse of sunshine. There will be a good deal of cloud around throughout the day on Saturday, a little bit of sunshine here and there, but further outbreaks of showery rain, and again some of that will be on the wintry side, particularly over higher ground. Now, as we head through Saturday evening and overnight, this showery rain continues to track its way eastwards, not clearing the east completely. Further showery outbreaks here, but elsewhere tending to turn drier as the night wears on. So it will be a dry, a bright, but a chilly start to the day for some on Sunday morning, particularly across more northern and western parts of the country. So as we start the day on Sunday, still a good deal of cloud across central and eastern areas, still some showers feeding through on that brisk north to northwesterly wind, but there will be brighter skies elsewhere, which will spread to most parts by the end of the day. So Sunday for most looking like the better day of the weekend for getting out and about, but turning unsettled again into next week with some very windy conditions on Tuesday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Last night's by-election in Bexley and Old Sidcup resulted from the tragic death of a good man. James Brokenshire's promising career was cut short by cancer. Now, the seat itself has been Tory since its creation in 1983 and was held by Ted Heath for many years. The result was therefore pretty much a given. But to reflect upon other issues, the clash between the old Heathites in the party and the Thatcherites in the party, and that battle that's going on right now, I'm delighted to be joined by the master of the numbers, Strathclyde University's Sir John Curtis. John, great to see you as always. I mean, first of all, just the Curtis take on the result. What did you make of it?
Pretty much, I think, what one would have expected given the current state of the national opinion polls. So at the moment, the opinion polls are putting Conservative and Labour neck and neck nationally. That means a 6% swing from the outcome of the general election 2 years ago. The swing in this constituency, well, it's 10% to Labour. Well, don't be too surprised at that, because governments often get rather more of a pasting in by-elections than they will do it wherever their standing currently is in the national opinion polls. And in any event, actually, we need to break up that swing. We need to look at it a little more closely. Labour's vote actually is only up by 7 points. That's not pretty remarkable for an opposition. Actually, I can find you almost a dozen other by-elections since 2010 in which the Labour vote's gone up by more than 7%. And even then, of course, Labour didn't win in 2015 or in 2017 or in 2019. So a 7-point increase in the Labour vote is nothing particularly to write home about. The other thing, however, that's going on is that the Conservative fall in their support 13 points. Definitely a much more disappointing result than Batley and Spen, for example, which, although they didn't win the seat, they pretty much held on to their vote. Just that small niggle that Richard Tice, the leader of the Reform Party, managed to save his deposit pretty much all of that vote would have come from Leave voters, and therefore mostly people who would otherwise have voted Conservative. Boris Johnson won't want to see Reform UK take off. Now, I think they're still a very long way from doing that. But just a warning there that if Reform UK were to become more widely known and were to start to pick up some support, then the Conservatives might have further reason to worry.
Sure. And Reform UK very cleverly, as their headline, and they made it clear at their party conference in Manchester, and they repeat it and repeat it and repeat it, is to talk about low tax, less regulation, speaking volumes to what some of Boris Johnson's enemies within the Conservative Party are beginning to say about him as well. They ain't stupid, Reform UK.
They're not, although, of course, if we look at the character of those people who voted Leave in 2016, and many of whom are still in favour of Leave 5 years on, they're not necessarily on the libertarian right economically in the way that Reform UK are. There's always been a bit of a dichotomy in the movement that got the Leave vote across the line between some of those on the elite side of the Leave movement, such as some of those who now occupy Reform UK, whose vision of Brexit was indeed sometimes dubbed Singapore upon Thames. That is, it would enable the UK to divest itself of various regulations that the European Union imposes and could have a much less regulated, more dynamic economy in that point of view. But actually, many of the people who voted Leave are actually the kind of people who are looking to Boris Johnson's levelling up agenda, which, of course, is a much more interventionist agenda. It's about trying to reshape our economy by improving its infrastructure, the state actually getting involved. So, yes, Reform UK can certainly appeal to a section of Leave support, and perhaps particularly the kind of Leave support that is to be found in a relatively leafy part of very out of London, and indeed a part of the world that politically is not really London at all. It's much more Kent and Surrey than London, but which perhaps wouldn't necessarily be as much to the threat of the Conservatives in the red wall constituencies, where, of course, they're most concerned above all to hang on to their Leave-inclined support.
Do you see that Reform UK might possibly have a similar role to the SDP back in the early 80s, when folk were fed up with Michael Foot's Labour Party, too much on the left, anti-European, the rest of it? Along they came, made that protest, got rid of Foot, only really to hand the party then over to Mr Blair and the Blairites. Could Reform UK have a similar impact on Boris Johnson's Conservative Party?
Well, I mean, let's certainly be clear, first of all, about what the crucial nature of the threat. I mean, a lot of people argue that what happened in the 1980s was that the SDP, by forming and then creating the alliance with the Liberals, split the anti-Conservative vote. Actually, I think one could question that view of history. A lot of people who voted for the SDP Liberal alliance in 1983 actually preferred the Conservatives to Labour if they were forced to choose. But anyway, let's come back to the present day. The threat, at least, of Reform UK is, of course, is that the foundation of Boris Johnson's success in the 2019 general election was not to persuade a majority of people in Britain that Brexit was a good idea, but rather to persuade those people who were already in favour of Brexit, which probably was slightly less than half the country at that stage, to unite behind the Conservative Party. And he was facilitated in that endeavour, helped in that endeavour, by Nigel Farage's decision not to contest the Conservative constituencies, which also helped to depress the Brexit Party vote where they did stand. So the crucial thing, therefore, to what Boris Johnson needs to do, he needs to keep that Leave constituency together and behind the Conservatives. And one thing he has to worry about Reform UK is even if Reform UK can only appeal to an element of Leave support, if they take 2-3% away from the Conservatives in what perhaps is a tight election in which perhaps the Conservatives might or might not get 326 seats and therefore an overall majority, that's a scenario that would worry Boris Johnson, because it might only be 2% of the vote. It might be a very particular niche part of the Leave vote, but it could still be enough to make the difference between a Conservative overall majority and behind Parliament and overhanging the future of this government, so far as next election is concerned, is the crucial reality that there aren't any other parties inside the House of Commons who wish to see this current administration remain in office, not even the DUP. So if the Conservatives will lose their overall majority, they will find it difficult to form another government. So therefore, even losing a little to Reform UK is something that Boris Johnson will want to avoid. Now, I think what we do have to realise about that, the SDP did get founded with a splash. They created the media headlines. They rapidly rose in the polls. Reform UK's problem is that really not very many people know what they're about. Not that many people necessarily know that they're, Brexit Party Mark II. The purpose of the party is not evident from the name.
Sure.
So unless Reform UK can actually begin to make more of an impression on the public about what they stand for, begin to be able to perhaps to appeal to some of that Leave vote, then maybe they won't be able to impose too much of a threat for the Conservatives, particularly in a general election. We have to remember, for a small minor party trying to make some space, by-elections are easy. Now, Richard Tyson, effective campaigner, would be able in that relatively small corner of South East London to get his party known. Doing that in 650 constituencies all on the same day is a much bigger task.
John, very quick one, 30 seconds if you can. I can't miss the opportunity with you on the programme to ask you this. Starmer's reshuffle, slow burner or another missed opportunity?
Well, it certainly, I think, it indicates intent. It's beginning to look like a shadow cabinet that might be one day be a potential Labour cabinet. But the truth is, the crucial thing Labour have to do is, one, to tell people what their vision of the kind of country they want to create is, and B, to persuade people that they've got the ability to do it. On both those two counts so far, it has to be said the leadership of the Labour Party under Sir Keir Starmer has been found rather decidedly wanting.
Sir John Curtis, it is genuinely always a pleasure, and thank you for fitting us in this Friday evening. Great to talk to you, John, and talk to you again soon, I hope. Thank you so much. The number cruncher that the number crunchers respect. Now, total change of tone and a seriously important story that we ourselves have got. One of the UK's most senior counter-terrorism officers has told GB News the public could prove vital in preventing another terrorist attack. Scotland Yard's Deputy Assistant Commissioner Matt Twist urged people to be extra vigilant in the run-up to Christmas, as the severe terror threat level means another attack is likely, highly likely. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White was granted exclusive access to a counter-terrorism patrol in the capital.
We're on the road with a team from Scotland Yard's Specialist Operations Division, a counter-terrorism patrol in the heart of central London.
Stevie, if you know, we're going to go down that little side road by the Trocadero.
They've been tasked with patrolling parts of the West End, on the lookout for anything suspicious.
Well, it's just a case of the fact that we can get further with the vehicle. You might see different things when you're out on foot, when we're out on the vehicle, but it's a whole package.
The deployment includes foot patrols.
Hello guys, how you doing? Yeah, good, thanks. Good, thank you.
With the terror threat level recently raised to severe, these patrols have taken on added significance. There are also plainclothes covert teams here, reporting back anything that seems out of place.
So as project servitor officers, we deploy in unpredictable fashion into areas where there's quite high footfall. As I say, I can't go into specific details on how we work due to security reasons, but as you see, you'll see uniformed officers, but we do have a range of other assets available to us.
It was the terrorist killing of Conservative MP Sir David Amess, followed by the bomb attack outside Liverpool Women's Hospital, that prompted security officials to raise the terror threat level. And so across the country, in the run-up to Christmas in particular, the public are being urged to be extra vigilant.
I mean, this is the first Christmas in a couple of years where lots of people are going to be together. There's lots of big events going on, and we want people to go and enjoy them. But we also know that the terrorist threat level has been raised to severe after the two awful attacks we've seen, one in Essex and one in Liverpool. And we just want the public to be vigilant. We mean that severe means an attack is highly likely. but it doesn't mean they shouldn't go about carrying on their normal business. What it means is that if you're worried about something, if you're suspicious about something, then tell us about it. And the message is very clear. By phoning us, by telling us there's something that doesn't feel right, you're not going to ruin somebody's life, but you may just save some.
In Manchester, the Christmas markets are highly popular. After a hiatus because of COVID, there is added enthusiasm this year. But an awareness too that crowded places like these are potential targets for terrorists.
I feel safe, but then it's a midweek day, so people are more spaced out. I think I'd probably not feel as safe if it was a weekend and it was very crowded.
Definitely more vigilant. I tend to, I'm more aware of left baggage and things like that.
You've just got to crack on. You can't let these things slow you down.
Back in London's Leicester Square, another element of these patrols is about raising public awareness of the potential threats.
We're part of a security team based at Metropolitan Police from Charing Cross Police Station. When you're out today, if you see anything that does look suspicious, no matter what it is, please give us a call.
Right across the UK, in mainly urban centres of population, there will be a noticeable increase in these police patrols. But authorities say, far from being alarmed, the public should be reassured by this enhanced security. With the terror threat level at severe, sadly, authorities know that it is only a matter of when, rather than if, there's another attack. And so the public, they say, have a potentially vital role in spotting anything that might prevent another tragedy. Mark White, GB News.
Great report there and great access. Congratulations, Mark. After the break, what would you do if your parcel was left like this? Brilliant. Or what if your parcel never arrives at all? I'll be speaking with the founder of the Consumer Action Group, Mark Gander, to reveal your options.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
The politics of language has careered into the joy of birth once again. The Royal College of Midwives has apologised for issuing a guidance note on helping newborns sleep better that referred to mothers as postnatal people. It subsequently said it had been a huge oversight as they were committed to ensuring women are never erased from the narrative around pregnancy and birth. This, however, is not a universal truth. Early this year, an instruction went out from the Brighton and Sussex University Hospital Trust to say chest feeding and birthing parents rather than breastfeeding and mothers. With me to discuss this is Brendan O'Neill, editor of Spike, who has recently written on these exact subjects. Good to see you, as always. I mean, heads above the parapet, Brendan. The Royal College has done the right thing, but this is now getting crazy that their default first draft could not see their way to saying mothers.
Exactly right. I mean, when you have the Royal College of Midwives, an organisation that deals primarily with women, well, exclusively with women, when even an organisation like that uses terms that avoid the word women and instead says things like postnatal people, then you know we have a real problem. We have a real problem with the way in which language is used, the way in which words are used, and the way in which womanhood is being erased from public life, being erased from public discussion. So I'm really pleased, as you say, that the Royal College of Midwives has apologised for its oversight and has promised not to do this again. But the fact that even a midwife association would use that kind of terminology, that is deeply worrying, and it raises really important questions about the way in which we understand womanhood in the 21st century.
Absolutely, but when I first joined GBNews all those months ago, I remember what I was saying, one of the things I was fed up with in political discourse, having to speak as if one was walking on eggshells. Oh, I mustn't use that word, I mustn't use it, because it's going to offend somebody. The fact of the matter is, this does nod to those who believe that people can identify whatever sex they or sexes that they wish to identify as. And that's fine. You can have a really good argument about whether they're right or wrong. But the fact that something like the Royal College of Midwives should have that as their default position is really deeply worrying.
Deeply, deeply worrying. And this is where the feminists and the other supporters of women's rights absolutely have a point when they say that the word woman is being erased and that the whole understanding of womanhood and the whole nature of womanhood is being erased in order to appease a very, very small number of people who believe in post-binary, non-binary, transgender ideology. When they say these things, they're absolutely right, because the Royal College of Midwives is entirely about helping women to give birth. That is what it exists to do. And when an organisation like that can't even use language that is specific to women's experiences and specific to womanhood itself, then you know that we have a very serious problem indeed. So the apology that they've given, or the promise that they've given to say that they will never do this again, they will never erase this word again, that's actually a very positive thing, because it shows that the pushback is working. The pushback in favour of reason, in favour of normal language, in favour of everyday words that people use, that is actually working. But the fact that they went to, as you say, that default position of saying postnatal people rather than women, which is, you know, women are the people who give birth, that is a problem in itself. And I think that raises questions about how far the gender ideology or the gender fluid ideology has really infiltrated institutions and warped how they think about everyday affairs.
Yes. I mean, also, the thing that struck me reading it as well, I mean, as the proud father of four, I know that any role that I had in being a postnatal person was essentially to be told by my wife to get out of the way because she knew what she was doing. Thank you very much indeed, and go and do something else. But the thing that reading the first draft of the Royal College of Midwives piece, the notion of chest feeding, i.e. you or me, as opposed to breastfeeding. If we tried that with an infant, then the poor little thing wouldn't last very long. I mean, it's medically inept by using what somebody thought was politically correct language.
Absolutely medically inept and deeply offensive, I think. You know, the fact is that chest feeding is an impossibility. The only people who can feed children are women. The only people who have cervixes are women. The only people who can give birth are women. We have to be honest about this fact. Now, some of those women may identify as men. And of course, most of us, because we're quite polite, we are willing to allow people to have their identities and to have their own terminology. We're willing to go along with that and to use the pronouns that they would prefer that we use. But the fact is that if you give birth, if you breastfeed, if you are someone who suckles a child and looks after a child in that early instance of life, you are a woman. And the erasure of that kind of language, the erasure of that way in which the vast majority of people understand the relations between the sexes and the differences between men and women, I find that deeply problematic, because I think that is about reordering how we understand the sexes, how we understand biology, how we understand society itself. So I think there's something deeply Orwellian about this attempt to rearrange language, rearrange words, to scrub certain words and ideas from the public record. That's something that should concern all of us who believe in freedom and reason. And I think a pushback against the Royal College of Midwives and other institutions that are using this terminology is actually incredibly important.
So do I. The final point is that I think if you want to have an intelligent and open-minded debate on things like trans and identification and what have you, you've got to be able to use the language that comes naturally to you and to me and everybody else you're never going to be ending up with the articulate truth.
Exactly right. And we also have to think about young people as well, children and teenagers. You know, how are people socialized into the world? They're socialized into the world through thinking about mothers and fathers, men and women, boys and girls. And I'm very worried about the impact that this kind of erasure of sex differences and erasure of biological language, the impact that that has on young people in particular, who often understand their surroundings and their relationships through these biological ideas. So we absolutely have to defend the right of people to use those kinds of terms. And I'm really pleased, actually, that the Royal College of Midwives has recognised its mistake and promised not to do it again. And I hope more institutions do that.
Hear, hear. Hats off to the Royal College, but a shame that it was the default position initially. Brendan, always a pleasure to talk to you. Provocative, thoughtful, and I'm sure we'll both get a reaction to it. But for the time being, thanks very much indeed. Now, finally, millions of people will be relying on delivery firms to bring Christmas presents over the next few weeks. And unfortunately, many will be left deeply disappointed, either because the delivery doesn't turn up or is stolen. And in fact, some fed-up customers have taken to social media to show some of the weirdest places that parcels have been left down the years. Here, for example, the delivery driver tried to disguise the package behind a few branches. Now, I don't think putting a few stones on top of the parcel is going to confuse any would-be thieves. And how on earth has the package ended up there? At least the Yodel delivery driver left a card with the message, "Sorry, top of the roof." But all joking aside, the parcel giant's Hermes has been accused of refusing to reimburse thousands of customers whose packages went missing. Campaigners claim that the firm have put up a series of obstacles to avoid claims, which include telling customers they need insurance in case Hermes loses an item. Well, to discuss this, the serious bit of it, I'm delighted to be joined by the founder of the Consumer Action Group, Mark Gander, who has successfully helped hundreds of people sue the firm. How big, first of all, let's get it in statistics. It'd be easy to pick out those pictures from Twitter, and there are many, many more besides. But how big is this problem?
Well, the first thing I do have to say, in fairness to Hermes, is that they are, as you said, a giant, okay? And so I fully expect that the vast majority of their parcels are successfully delivered. And running a consumer rights organisation the way I do, we tend to get the people who are having difficulty. And in fact, if you look on Facebook, you'll see also there are thousands of people who are complaining. And it seems to me that when things go wrong, then Hermes don't shape up. People have their consumer rights. People have, of course, their expectations to receive their parcels. And when Hermes get it wrong, then they seem to quibble. They seem to want to get out of it, and they use a whole range of excuses. And they operate, I think, a kind of triage system where they test people, and only the persistent go through. And the persistent basically means that the people who are prepared to start a county court claim.
Yeah. So really what we call in the trade news that you can use. Quick 3 points. What are the key things that people should do if they think something that they'd ordered and paid for simply hasn't turned up or has turned up bust?
Well, I think that, with Hermes, I'm afraid you've got to be very quick to decide to start a county court action because, as I say, they push it right to the limit. They will use excuses such as you don't have an insurance, and they expect you to get an insurance to protect Hermes against their own negligence or the criminality of their employees. We have a lot of parcels turning up which are empty and being resealed. Clearly, the contents have been stolen. I'm afraid probably by Hermes staff, and Hermes still says, well, you needed to insure, not them, and yet they've got much more money to insure. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that they'll often try to blame the parcel broker. Well, that could be all right if it's Parcel to Go or somebody who's in England, but Packlink is a real favourite of Hermes, and for some reason or other, they stopped being in England about a year ago and moved to Spain. So if you want to try and sue somebody in Spain, you won't manage. But luckily, there is an Act of Parliament, a 1999 Act of Parliament, sorry, this is a bit dry going on about this, which gives you third-party rights to bring your own court action against Hermes if you are the intended beneficiary. And clearly, if you're the sender of the parcel or if you're the recipient of the parcel, then you are the intended beneficiary. And the final thing is that when you start your court action, stand your ground. Hermes will push you to mediation, and in pretty well every case, they will put their hands up at mediation and pay you out, even with a figure as low as, I think I saw one today, £8.97. They force that person to use the county court, which is a very cheap taxpayer-funded way of Hermes attempting to crush people and to avoid their responsibilities.
3 points asked for, 3 points delivered. Brilliant advice. Thank you so much indeed. That's Mark Gander, and he is available online and on websites. That's it from me. I'm back at midday tomorrow, but next up here on GB News, I'm delighted to say, it's my dear friend, Mark Dolan.
It's time to remind ourselves, there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello, rather changeable conditions this weekend. There will be outbreaks of rain at times for just about all of us at some point. However, it does tend to turn drier and brighter for most on Sunday, if feeling on the chilly side. Now back to the here and now, a number of weather fronts skirting across southern counties of England. Meanwhile, this weather front waiting in the wings will bring thicker cloud and outbreaks of showery rain in from the northwest. This may well give some sleet or snow over the higher ground of the north. All in all, quite a lot of cloud around overnight tonight, and that will help keep temperatures up, at least not falling too low. We could just see a touch of frost in more rural parts of the west, where we do see clearing skies towards the end of the night. So a little bit of a chilly start for some tomorrow, but not as cold as some recent mornings. However, as the wind starts to become brisker through the course of the day, it will feel decidedly